Show. I'm here today with Powell, Greg, Andrew, and Jason Story. I'm going to be talking a little bit about AI stuff. I think a bit about game systems. Story had some stuff to talk about there. I've got some stuff I want to bring up with them, and I think it could be an interesting conversation. I wanted to briefly mention that the Humble Bundle is still going on with Powell and Andrew and a couple of other people's awesome assets. That's insanely discounted. It's almost like just a little bit above 1%. So it's like what is that, like 98.5% off or something? Yeah, kind of crazy as a bundle. And then I want to tell everybody to make sure to go subscribe to Andrew's channel. He's just a couple subscribers away from 3,000. So I'm going to drop the link in chat. Go subscribe now and check it out. You can see him building systems and assets for the asset store all live and building a game at the same time. So super fun. All right. So welcome everybody. That was a lot of my words. I got to try to save my voice for tomorrow. Oh yeah, tomorrow is AI Game Dev Day. We're going to have a full 9-hour, 10-hour long conference of just AI stuff for game devs. Just go to GameDevGuild.com and get a free pass, or we still have some of the pro passes available to come join in the expo hall as well. But we're just going to be talking about actionable AI stuff for game developers. It's all the things that people are actually using. Some of the people may end up joining who are speaking too. So it's people who are actually using AI stuff in their game development workflows, showing what it is, how they're using it, and how it's been helpful. So make sure you come join that. Yes, it would make sense to use an AI voice from a talk tomorrow, but it would actually help because I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice. But go to GameDevGuild.com and grab a free pass for that. And we're also going to have a talk. I get to interview Mark Whitten tomorrow, which is going to be awesome because I get to ask him a bunch of questions about AI stuff and kind of figure out what Unity is doing on the AI side, which I think will be hopefully pretty insightful because I'm really, really curious. And see what it'll say publicly too, because everybody's going to get to see it. So yeah, welcome everybody. Anyone want to say hi?
Hello.
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 Not Jason. He does not want to say hi. No.
I have some. I'm just chewing some nuts. There we go. Sorry for distracting.
Feeling nutty. It was the shirt and the
exactly. It's marketing
the cover, right?
I got caught. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who didn't see the YouTube thumbnail, one of the shirts says "nutty" on it, and it was a picture from yesterday with the Unity hoodie on it, and it got transferred over there. I've been using Midjourney now where you upload images and then just give it a prompt to tell it to change it however you want. So there's a picture of me with a Unity shirt as a wizard.
And your new channel is going to be called The Nutty Developer.
It's going to be called the Need a Razor Developer after seeing all these pictures of these giant beards. Holy shit.
Midjourney always throws random text on images that it thinks should have text. And it's never the text you want.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I have a theory they do it on purpose because they don't want to get into trouble with brands. It's bad enough to get in trouble with the Pope, but you don't want to get in trouble with Coke.
That could be. Oh. So, I guess before we go on to AI stuff, I wanted to dive into a question on systems with you, Story. So one of the things I've been working on this week a bit is that little travel game that I started putting together last week. I think I started it last Thursday or something, where you like essentially a cruise director, and you set up trips, from pick a home place, and then you set up trips to other places. Right now I've got it all themed in outer space, so you pick a home planet, and then you set up trips to random destinations. I've got like a weird nebula, a giant worm in space, and all this kind of stuff, right? One of the things I've been thinking about with this project, it's just about done. It's kind of in a polish and content phase right now. But one of the core things I've been thinking about doing with it is turning it into something like an asset. Like just put it up on the asset store for people that want to build something similar, but want to theme it however they want. And they want to put it in as a you know, a fantasy game where they're, you know, elves on a, I don't know, an old boat or whatever, or like a modern time game where they're doing real cruises, or, you know, maybe it's not on boats and they're walking, who knows. But if they wanted to do something else with it, and in the process, because of that, I've been trying to really minimize how opinionated everything is with the systems, so that people don't kind of get the impression that, you know, if you're building this is what you have, the way that you have to build it. So I'm trying to keep it relatively simple and unopinionated, but I still feel like, hold on one second, had a little bug crawling across the counter. I still feel like I want it to be, I guess, clean enough that it's still setting some good examples. So I'm curious, I guess all of this comes down to my big long question of what systems or patterns do you think are kind of open enough and unopinionated enough to kind of put into anything, and what would you kind of recommend doing there as your base, like your kind of core? Because I know you're very into, you know, heavily built in good systems, but if you're doing something trying to keep it as unopinionated as possible, are there still some patterns or systems or things that you think you would almost definitely include or feel okay including there?
Yeah, it's a very long question. I will say, my personal preference is actually, I guess the best way to describe this is literally just before this show, I was chatting with some people about Cinemachine and about it, like its product offering and what it does. And I actually said, I think it's one of the most powerful assets you can get, and it's useful in almost every single project, but I hate using it. I legitimately just hate having to use it. I will use it because it's better than all alternatives, but I hate using it. And that surprised a few people, and they were like, why? Why do you hate using it? And my number one philosophy with a lot of these things is to engage with the user or the client of whatever it is you're doing. In your case, so you're making an asset with people attempting to consume it. The ideal world is it does the thing the person wants the asset to do. That's its like main job. Cinemachine being an example. Why do people install Cinemachine? What do they want from it? Well, I would say 99.9% of people are going to have a question that broadly lands at, I want a camera that is like game X. That's it for most people in most cases. Which game they're talking about might change, but fundamentally what they want is, I want a first-person controller that feels like Doom's camera, or that feels like that camera in Journey, or that feels like a Metroidvania style camera that goes across multiple screens or whatever. And yet you install Cinemachine and you have to learn a complete pile of jargon around VCams and, you know, blends and multiple cameras, and you have to understand what priorities are to have a priority queue of sorting back and forth. And it's like, what do most people actually want? They want to drop a thing in and say, make first person camera, make roguelike camera. Then after that, they can go in and tweak settings. But the idea that it front loads all of the features is a completely terrible user experience design thing. So to answer your question, the way I like to think about this is, rather than thinking about a system as a holistic big problem to solve, I think in terms of, if someone wants an asset, they want it to do a thing. If I want to add saving to my game, I want to put something in that says save game. And I might have to learn like the 1 or 2 lines required to engage with that by saying provide save data, receive save data, then I will fill in the bits needed for my game. But the contract I want to deal with is the concept of save. And if I'm a power user, I might want to go in and change unique details about whether it's compressed or whether it's using particular algorithms or whether it's tagged with version numbers or whatever. But fundamentally, out of the box, it should just do the thing it's meant to do. And a lot of assets don't. So to your point, I would say look at your project and go, what is the value proposition of the whole thing? What are the pieces of this that people like? If I was to take one of those pieces out, what are 5 ways to ask the same question? If it's an inventory, what are 5 ways people might use inventory? If it's you're using the number system, don't think about it as a game system. Think about it as, if someone has a game and they're like, I want to have stats that go up and down. I'm making an idle clicker game. How can I facilitate that in the simplest way possible? Add clicker stat, check clicker stat value, update clicker stat, remove clicker stat. increase amount required for stat, lower amount required for stat. Just think in terms of what the use cases of the user actually are. Yeah, so, and then the specific design, we can get into details about how you might handle strategy pattern stuff to allow injection of features with contracts and building up various different modular stuff and favoring command query separation. And we can get really into the weeds on that if you want, but principally I think the answer is always the same. It comes down to, does it feel like it does the thing the person wants the thing to do? That's number one every time.
Right. No, I think that actually helps a lot, because in this case, I should probably determine and figure out what that is. Is the thing that it does like let people build those games, or is it that it lets people kind of learn how to put those systems together and build it and kind of like rip it apart and then do their own, relatively different things? So is it more like a kind of like a template where they're just putting in content and building, or is it more of a kind of a learning and extension resource? I guess I got to figure that out and decide that.
I think a good example of this, which I'm really disappointed by because it kind of fell by the wayside, is back before they were bought, back when it was UFPS. UFPS had its issues. It was a bit too it had too many systems again, too complicated for what it was doing. But it had a hyper focus on spring joints for its animated camera stuff, which is clearly something the creators thought was cool, but like not relevant to most people. But it did one thing really well that no other asset has done as well since, which is it used text file configs, that you would basically load a text file and it would just configure it that way. And so it came with Doom-like. It came with, camera with on the moon. It came with camera where you're, underwater. And it had all of these like general settings that made it feel good. And so to me, I look at something like Cinemachine or like what your asset is and say, let's take an example of whatever basic type of game structure, make a text file that loads the settings that way, as me as a developer suggest you would do that, drop it in, and abracadabra it pre-configures. And the beauty of a system like that is you could have a load of them. Making more profiles is very easy to do. It's very easy to read and understand what it's doing. And even better than all of that, it facilitates people making their own, saving them out, loading them back in. And if your community gets big enough, you could have a community profile page of people providing alternate versions that are more or less like certain systems. So the idea, if you don't know the answer to the question of what do people want from this, support the ability to load configurations. And again, it's not that hard. Like for all of us here, I'm literally talking about write a file that saves each of the 10 important properties out to a text file, maybe even an INI or CSV or whatever you want, and then just drop it back on again. You can literally capture the drop event, or when it's on validate, when it's dropped into the field, load all the values. That's literally all you have to do.
You could also just do a scriptable object. If it's set up for a scriptable object, you just export that as a Unity package as well.
You can, but again, we come back to like, what do people want? Well, people don't want scriptable objects. What they want is the ability to configure it a certain way, but then be able to tweak it. And the benefit of a text file means you can basically hand someone a text file. They can open it and see springiness equals 12 and change it to 14 if they want to. There's no, all of the very specific things that are valuable to this system is very clearly defined. You don't have to go and, in a scriptable object, you'd have to expose which fields you'd want, build a different thing, and it would live in Unity. When a text file could be passed around and shared sans Unity,
Yeah. I guess my preference as a user would be the scriptable file, only because I don't want to open a text file. I would rather import into Unity and then see those exposed there. I would expect them, though, to be exposed. The same springiness value would be there, would be explained. There would be tool tips. There would be all the stuff to understand it as well.
Well, there's no reason you can't do that. But my point would be, if you could load a text file that populates the menu, it would then hide the bits that aren't irrelevant and show the ones that are. Then you can tweak the values and then save out a new text file, right? So now you've got all the same freedom and flexibility without having to worry about the text file portion. But it means if you did want to expose those text values in a slider in your UI in your game, so much easier than having to figure out what the method calls for each of the contracts or the objects are. You can just have number 10, change to number 12, and then change a line in the file. And if you provide a way to do that even easier, then it's much simpler, right? Because that's literally how old games used to do INI files for configs. It was just open file, there are settings, change no fly or clip mode from 0 to 1. And you didn't have to be a programmer to know that, but it was very easy for people to engage with systems. Right now, it's like scriptable object, which one, where, what folder structure, if I was to open it, what settings do I change? Is the name exposed in the variable the same as the variable in the script itself? Often not. It's often m underscore in the script, but not on the editor drop-down thing. Basically, it's a lot more work required for conceivably a very simple thing.
Do you like text files for larger amounts of data? Or would you go with something like a Google Forms or Sheets or something like that, or scriptable objects? Or
to be fair, I'm talking about the top level config of something. Like if you're going into like the weeds, then sure, you kind of want something more control.
So I will say, like your NPC data of all your NPCs in Andrew's game. Where would you prefer to store that?
Well, for that, I would just have a contract called Savable that receives a dictionary of string object values. And the answer is whatever way I feel like that day, right? I would build a version that saves to a JSON file to start with. I would work on that for most of the game's development. And then at some point, I would say, maybe I'll switch to a SQLite database, or maybe I will use an online provider. But the contract is the same. It is, here's thing, put in settings, ask for settings back. I don't really need to worry about that.
But you wouldn't just necessarily throw it all into a text file.
No, again, I'm talking about, say, if you're an asset provider and it has 15 core values, how springs the camera, does it clamp this or that, does it zoom in or not, where is it getting the, just like, is it using the old input system or the new input system? If there's like a 5 or 6 core things that represent the configuration feel of this particular setup, if you can represent that in under 15 values, which most things you can, the configuration at the top level, that's roughly what I'm talking about.
That makes sense. I just want to make sure everybody was clear on that. They don't start going like, oh, I'm going to take all my game data and create 100 different files and have a bunch of text files. Yeah. So in those cases, you serialize it out into something. And I think Andrew would default to scriptable objects. And I usually kind of default to scriptable objects too. And then if needed, you can always do a transition or do the conversion from scriptable objects into something else, or even set up a process that just creates them and then or generates data back and forth if you want. And then there are a couple assets on the asset store that do exactly that. They do like Google Sheets to asset or to scriptable objects and back and forth and stuff.
Yeah, I have one thing that I would add is that scriptable objects, as Jason said, are only working in Unity. If you want to work with different kind of tools that aren't built in Unity, for example, when we are building a river, yeah, and this river will be generated through RAM. We have scriptable objects for it, we have profiles. Yeah, but if someone uses real world data and he downloads this data from some GIS servers or just partial things, they don't know what scriptable object is. So we had to add for the importing of RAM text file that's accustomed to many things that just has some points as basic width of the river. So someone who knows how to generate data from real world terrain data, he just exports it from his tool into text file and we can import it back. Yeah. So for me, text files are other possibility to interconnect with other types of tools.
And that's the part that I didn't want to really go for myself, because it was a whole different world. But you're right. The reason why internally I do that is because I look at project scaling. And step 1 is a dev messes with sliders. Step 2 is someone on the team messes with sliders for you because you're too busy building actual features. Step 3 is this is modifying often enough that somebody needs this as a dedicated job. So we want to hire someone who may or may not be technical. So now we can find a way to build the tool to do this. And you can either have them learn Unity, which is a big ask for somebody, or you can make a web page with 4 buttons on it that type in the values, load in the thing, spit out a text file, and the text file does all the things that you want that configuration to do. Or you can decide later on that you're doing testing in bulk, or you're trying out 50 different variations to find out what's more fun. You can build an automation system or script that will try out different builds, generate builds with different configs in them. The point is the scalability of that approach is infinite relative to, okay, scriptable objects, now I have to figure out what to do with the scriptable objects, which is a very niche Unity specific.
No, you make them install Unity. It has to be the exact right version. And then they screw that up, then you make them uninstall it and go back.
Certainly, I think if it's a question of like end users in a runtime build loading a file that changes the build outside of Unity, then that makes a lot of sense. And I think in that case, a hybrid approach is also available where you could just have an importer in Unity as well that would just bring in this file, create a new scriptable object if it doesn't exist, if that is something, a controller by that name or whatnot. But
To be clear,
I
I do that. Like that's when I
Yeah.
say this, I'm not saying the scriptable object is the be all end all source of truth. It is for me because it's how I think about the stuff. But literally, I will always read the file into scriptable object, live and work in Unity in the scriptable object, and then save it out. So I agree with you. I think like if you are in Unity already and working with Unity, the scriptable object thing is probably easier most of the time, especially if you're using Odin Inspector and you can serialize visually the drop down of all of the stuff you want to play with. So I do that, but like I said, the difference factor of saying, okay, this scriptable object has 20 values in it. It might take me 2 hours or 3 hours of development to build an exporter that just appends each one of these to something, saves it out as either JSON or text file, and now I have added on top of my entire system infinite support for saving out, loading, people sharing configs, all the other variations of stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, I think, Jason, when you talk about Ask the Store, you one of the key considerations is going to be your quality of life as a developer who has to support this. I mean, you don't technically have to, but if you want people to like you and not hate you, then yes, you have to provide some level of support, or at least be proactive in the start to minimize the chance of support. And I think you'll find there's people who run the gamut. Jason, you touched on this, Story, you touched on this. People want the easy button, and then there's people who want to control everything, and there's people in the middle. And so I think the best system does both. The best system gives people that, here, if you want if you want straight up Oregon Trail, click this button and it's Oregon Trail. It will set up everything you need. It's basically a demo, but it's a demo people can use. I mean, and Pavel, you probably know very well that people use your demo scene as their levels because it's the easy button. They want a pretty forest or a pretty meadow, and I do it all. I'm doing it right now, in fact, with my own stuff. And I load up his demo scene and I say, great, that's good enough for me. I'm going to move on with my life. So there's that. But then there's also the ability to make it more powerful. So you're going to be in a situation where you're expecting users to reskin this, basically. So first, some won't. Some will just ask to flip it, say lovey. But then, so you've got one level where it's like, okay, this is the game. Change out the sprites or whatever, the 3D models, and boom, you've got a brand new game. But then what happens when somebody says, oh yeah, but I also want to add this other thing, a new character. So now you have to think, okay, well, what happens when somebody adds a new character? It's probably not that difficult. Or a new spaceship or an analog to a spaceship. But then, and you'll probably have solutions for this right at the top of your head. What happens when somebody says, oh, but I want these things that currently can't do something to do something else? Well, they'll have to create their own class that overrides those things. And so setting up everything with understanding that most people are probably going to want to just use the easy button. Some people are going to want to dig a little bit deeper into it and be like, well, let me customize it. And then some people are going to want to say, well, I'm going to make my own class on everything and make that as easy as possible. Now you've got 3 different ways of working with the same asset that all require different technical skill levels. And that's where I go into the scriptable object, and really the ability to have a custom inspector that kind of guides people to what you want them to see and explains, hey, careful here. This one, don't touch. Like, unless you know what you're doing, don't touch this button. Because some people want to touch that button because they know what they're doing. Other people, do not touch that button, please. And when you touch that button, put a big yellow warning label, warning, you touch that button. Now it's wrong. So, and I think that's the thought process that I go through, at least when I'm doing my own systems for the asset store, covering that gamut of user cases and user profiles.
That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that, but there are a couple places where I could easily add just some obvious and simple extensibility to make that I think a lot easier for people to kind of build upon too, and I guess to also see how to extend things. I've got another question, I guess, for everybody here. One of the other things I've been doing in there is keeping the data model really, really simple. There's really not a lot of data that keep track of your current ship, how much money you've got, like what your currently selected destination is, your fuel, and there's like a couple other little things that are little bits of data. There's maybe 10 variables total. And to keep it super simple and very unopinionated, I've made it so that it's all just in a static game data class, and they're all just static public fields that are readable and writable. I can see them in the inspector, I can view them, and it's pretty, I would say, it's not what I would recommend in a professional project. I guess the problem that I'm struggling with here is that if this were a project with 2 developers on it, I would say, like, don't do this. Like, changes, get away from this. Like, don't make all these things public and static. But since it's just me, it's short, it's quick, and I'm trying to keep it simple. Keeping everything there static means that I don't have to deal with managing where all of this data is, and I don't have to explain that when it comes to making this available to people to kind of learn from, those, see that all the data is there. My concern, though, is that people will see it and be like, oh, well, all I have to do is make everything always static, which in some cases in a game like this, the part of the problem that I'm dealing with is that in this game, that might be totally fine, especially if they're a solo developer building it out and they're not going to change much, because there's really, if you've got 10 variables in your game, where you store them usually doesn't make any real difference. It's not like you've got an RPG with all kinds of interconnected data and stuff going on that you've got to manage, I think, a little bit better. So I think it's more like Space Invaders level of data. Like,
I admit
not much.
That particular problem is probably one of my biggest struggles with content creation stuff, is that the amount of times somebody's doing something and I say, oh, you can do this to improve it, make it 10% easier to use this, and they're like, oh, thanks. And then they ask the inevitable question, how would you do it? And I always say, you don't want me to answer that question. Like, no, I do. And so then I say, I will answer it if you want. And then I do. And I say, well, personally, I would use a dependency injection framework with an entry point that would set up my data use. And I would go through a whole big pile of stuff. And they'd be like, I don't understand that, or that's too complicated. I'm like, I know. That's why I didn't want to tell you that, because the answer of how I would do it, it isn't a 10% increase. Like, I make a very clear point of trying to establish where someone is, what they could do to improve it, and give them a step in the right direction towards what they're doing. Because a lot of the time, like, this isn't about intelligence or about whatever. It's just, I've been doing this for X number of years across 12 different industries of different stuff. And so my approach it's not even about like Unity stuff. It's not like I have more Unity experience. It's that I have taken some of my favorite bits from web dev, or some of my favorite bits from when I used to work building Android applications. And my solution isn't one thing. It's, well, I liked how MVVM used to do their application layer boundaries. And so I took the relay command pattern example from that, but I didn't really like how they did this. And so when I started doing and it's like an amalgam of stuff. And so my expectation for someone to say, how do you do it? It's like, well, I do it based on the things I learned in these multiple different industries. And you're not going to have had the exact life experience I did. So my answer isn't going to satisfy you as like a thing. Instead, I'm trying to like guide the specific areas in your thing, which would make your thing better for what you're trying to do. So that whole relationship of like how much is too much and how do you handle that information and how do you set a precedent of what you would do versus like what is a better improvement is very, very difficult. From personal experience, it's very, very difficult.
Jason,
go ahead.
First of all, Story, I fully appreciate as a recipient of that sort of guiding. I've appreciated that over the years. So I'm working on a compass radar, compass bar system, kind of a large system, and I'm facing a lot of the same challenges I think you are facing here, where it's really a straightforward thing. It's a compass, it's a radar, it's a horizontal compass bar, it's screen overlays that go to the edge and show you the arrow. It's nothing reinventing any wheels. Games do this. But I also know that the minute somebody gets it, there's going to be somebody who wants to just throw it in there and have it work. So I have to have an easy button, right? But I also have to have configurations, because somebody's going to want, well, I want a different icon. Of course, I want my own icons. I want to control the opacity. I want to control the color. I want to control the size. I want to control how it behaves when it goes from the screen to the edge. And so now I've got sliders and buttons and configuration files. And so now I'm using scriptable objects as a config file, basically. So there's a default, and every single item has to bring in another configuration file, which has a slew of options. And then each one of those options has a Boolean. Do you want to override this or not? So you click it, and then you provide your new value. So, you could have just one target be a castle, and so you want to override the icon, you want to override the distance that it will show. So the castle will show when it's 100 meters away, while the flowers only show 2 meters away, whatever. But then there's even another level on top of that, which I'm going to have to put in the documentation, but you're going to have to go to the documentation to really understand it. And that's, you can script overrides as well. So you can go from use the default easy button to let me just configure it a little bit with this, bring in a new configuration file and click some buttons, to now I'm going to script something in my game that says, oh, if your perception skill is higher, then make the max opacity higher, or the max distance higher. So now you can get into this, ooh, my character has more skill. So only for this type of things, only for the traps, make it different. So now you can really get into the weeds of customizing this for your own project. And so I think for your thing, configuration files are going to be super helpful for that. And you can think of it easy as like an easy, medium, hard. Like if you want to have an easy setting for your game, you know, turn on easy mode, or turn on hard mode. Now suddenly everything has, you know, everything's harder. So that kind of thing, I think, would go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, again, like to your point exactly, I literally built a logging system yesterday. I was working on something, and I'm, without getting into too much detail, I'm working on a VR project, and if you're trying to debug a VR project, it can be hell because you have to put on the headset to try it and test it, which makes it very hard to read the console when you're doing that. And even though debug breakpoints are a better solution normally for debugging, you can't easily breakpoint test something when you're in a headset in a build. It's not as quite useful. So I would usually design my logging system in a certain way where I don't actually log everything. I only log the relevant stuff. But when you're on a team with X number of people and everyone's writing logs and you have no control over who's going to log what, when, and where, you still want to have control over like debugging things, but without having to deal with the headache that is 5,000 logs just spammed to the console from the 30 different systems that are all doing whatever. So I wanted a solution for myself as if I was downloading an asset that would just solve my problem, or at least get me close to it. And so what I said to myself was, what do I wish this did? I wish there was something that sat in between the logs being fired into the system and the console in Unity that just consumed those log messages and then allowed me to apply filters and rules and searches I want, and then give me the output of that, and I could display it on some kind of terminal or screen or something in VR, and then give me buttons to look back and forth and do that. So that's what I did. I built a thing which took the log handler that Unity uses to handle logs, interjected in between them, ate all of the logs, gave them back to Unity so the console still works, and then took all of those messages and stored them into a different thing. But then there's a bunch of other edge cases now you have to hit, like, well, what if the log files get too big, they overrun the memory? Well, so then I said, well, I don't want log files to do that. So I have a limit on the max number of logs I will store. And I set it to something big like 1,000, but I can change the slider to make it smaller. And that's fine. But now what if I lose the logs and I want to keep the ones that I have, but I don't like, it's now dropping off logs that are past that point. How do I deal with that? Well, I want to save it to a file. So I wrote a thing that saved the logs to a file. And then every time it hit that cap, it saved to a file. But now I'm worried, well, what if there's too many log messages that will eat the memory of the machine as I save out the files? So I built a thing that would then, every time I save a new file, check how many files there are and delete the older ones longer than whatever time. Anyway, my point in all of this is I solve each problem one as they come along, and I end up with something that has that magic button vibe of like, if I'm on a project tomorrow and it's a big project someone invited me to work on, and I want to like see the logs of the existing stuff, I can drop this script in and it will just do all of that. It'll just interject, do logs, save files, do the thing, save them out at certain points, and then I can go into the prefab and I can toggle on, do the persistence, limit the amounts, all the different various toggles on and off there. But to me, I think what's vitally important is that first part that you're describing, which is, I call it batteries included. It's the out-of-the-box concept that when I drop this thing in and press play, it should work. It may not work the way I intended to work, it may not be the features I want exactly, but it will work out of the box initially so that I can get a sense of what it does and how it should function for what I need. So yeah, 100% with you on that one.
So you both agree that you shouldn't have to do a whole bunch of Cinemachine setup or other setup on whatever thing you install? I
mean, I guess in a way that's such an opportunity for a quick asset. Cinemachine quick settings. Download, pay $10, $20, whatever you want for this asset, which downloads to the machine, click this button, it's set up to look just like Doom, because that easy button is so people are buying time at that point. You're not buying, you can do it yourself, but you're just buying time for yourself.
Pal, everybody seems to love your assets in chat. Do they all come with an easy button too? They just kind of work. That's the demo scene, right?
Yeah, there's a demo scene.
I think demo scene is one thing. The second thing is lots of prefabs for different possibilities to use. Yeah. So, for example, trees, we have trees that work as prefabs. We have trees that better work as Unity terrain trees. Or in older versions, we had grass that works as prefab, as Unity terrain grass, as Unity terrain tree, and so on and so on. So, lots of possibilities that we think of how the users can use them. Yeah. And for tools, tools have very much easy buttons. I think most of our tools works in 3 to 4 clicks. You have to have ready asset working. Yeah. So, for example, for RAM, it's one create RAM river, 2 clicks to add 2 points on the terrain, and you have delivered. Yeah. Only for lake, it's 4 because you need a triangle to form a lake.
Everybody that doesn't know what RAM is, you tell them what it is. I assume that probably 75% of the people here know what that is, but for everybody who's not familiar with the acronym, the 25%, you can tell them what it is.
RAM is river auto material is tools and materials, prefabs that go around creating rivers and river site materials areas, just like the ones behind me. The video behind me is about mostly RAM that was flowing, and we are working right now on new version. It should be this year or early next year for creating even more water-like areas.
And one thing that I think he's selling short is the material aspect of that. It comes with a whole lot of different river materials. So you can get faster rivers, slower rivers, murky rivers.
And for the easy mode for this ones, we created scriptable object that has different setups, because materials are one thing. Yeah, there's a lot of settings that you have to set up. So we have prepared scriptable objects with profiles that you take just the profile, drag and drop it onto the object on the scene view or in the hierarchy component, and it just set up everything to these objects, so you can change them quite heavily.
Yeah,
and they're interchangeable with it. I think we have few roads profiles, we have rivers, and we have lava profiles that are interchangeable with these tools.
Yeah, they're freaking awesome. I've been using these things forever. So I remember the first time I saw RAM, I was like, oh, that is freaking cool as hell. I need a project to put it in. So I got it and then tried to figure out a project to put it in. Of course, it didn't fit in any of my projects because I didn't have any rivers. All my projects were in outer space, but I kept trying anyway. So it looks freaking amazing.
You need a whitewater rapids game.
A traveling whitewater rapids game. There you go, Jason.
You should have Dave make it with a motion simulator though. So you're actually in the thing, just paddling with your controllers and stuff, trying to.
Lots of spray bottles too that get triggered.
Oh yeah, I would imagine he'll definitely have those, and then he'll have you wear a mask for when you fall in the water and you're drowning. Right, Dave? I assume Dave's out there listening now. I was talking about him drowning everybody. So there's a question in chat about the river back behind you. Is that URP or HDRP?
This one is older video. I specially put it. It's standard version. So standard BIRP, and but it works in HDRP, URP, and all other versions also. I think I have the. Yeah, here's the mountain asset that also has the demo shaders for the river, and it's in HDRP.
That's super pretty.
And it supports lots and lots of Unity versions. I think the RAM has the longest list of supported Unity versions from them all.
I've said before, like, that is one thing you do that even if I did, if I was an asset store developer and I had tons of assets in the store, I would put very explicitly, you're getting maybe 3 or 4 versions back of like the LTSs. I am not supporting the sheer amount of nonsense that happens every time Unity has a random idea and suddenly ruins 3/4 of my code. That is not happening. I don't care. That's like, as far as I'm concerned, you'll get whatever the last few LTSs, which should be most projects in the last X number of years. You go way above board for that to the degree that, again, really great for people using it, but I would not be doing it myself.
I think the biggest problem I had last time was we released the new version for Lava. We released it specifically. Give me a second. I will check the Lava version because I have to go to the lowest possible version with it. Yeah, it works on from 2021.3.24, and it's very important that it's .24 because Unity between .17 and .24 changed 4 functions for finding objects on the scenes. They changed. They didn't give any information that functions will be not usable, that they will be changed, anything. They just changed how the parameters of the functions.
Wait, which one's changed?
I can.
Do you remember?
I will open the Lava because I gave support for it last 2 weeks ago, I think.
I'm wondering which change that was.
Find objects by type. Yeah,
Oh,
I use them for finding some things in editor. Yeah, in editor mode, not play mode.
Yeah.
And that was they changed the last parameter. They added 1 parameter more.
Yeah.
So entire code doesn't work.
Is
in
it
the
a
edit
default
version.
parameter? I mean, an optional parameter, or
Nope.
No,
Nope.
it's a new required one. Yeah.
It's new required one. And
Yeah.
it changed in the LTS version between one version and the other version. For me, I think that shouldn't happen, but yeah.
Yeah, I was curious.
Someone was asking if I can make him a code for 2021.3.17. And yeah, I had to write 2 files to send him some support. So, yeah.
All right. I wanted to make sure to talk about this for a moment. We got the conference coming up tomorrow, and Andrew's not visible in this view, so we're switching to this one. And there's a couple talks. I've been waiting for this for a while. I think I've told you guys all that I mostly set up this AI event so that I could keep up with all the AI stuff and have people kind of show up all in one day and teach me everything. It's kind of the goal of it, and it seems to be coming together. We've got a couple thousand people signed up coming tomorrow, and we've got a lot of really good speakers. And I just wanted to go over the sessions really quick and see if there was anything that you guys were particularly interested yourselves. I don't know if you guys have seen the lineup. So we've got Seth talking about modular architecture for emergent AI behaviors. And if I'm remembering right, this is actually not just a talk about like generative AI stuff. So a lot of the talks are on the new generative AI, creating things and using that, or using ChatGPT like LLMs. But this is a bit more of like standard AI stuff too that you would use. That was kind of the first talk, which I think is great because I think a lot of people would be interested in that. But I think we had at the end a little bit of how you can use some of the new stuff in there with it too. And then Etonics is here in chat, I believe, and we'll be talking about art generation with Stable Studio. And then we've got AI generated music right after that for games, which I think would be good because it's one of the things that if it's not AI generated, I'm probably going to spend like, an hour searching around and finding some music anyway for my projects. And I feel like for this, especially for this asset store project, it's perfect because I can just create something that I can just put in there. It doesn't have to be anything particularly special. And I'm not a music connoisseur, so picking good music isn't going to happen no matter what I do. So I feel like this definitely is going to be useful. And then of course Corvallis, who I thought might be here today but isn't yet. Maybe he'll show up. we're talking about the anatomy of NPC AI. Apparently, the title didn't get updated here, which is going to be about, for what I understand loosely, I try not to spoil any of these, but about the LLMs controlling AI. So doing more like a generated AI where you have these characters that you can talk to and interact with. And we've got Mohammed's talk on OpenAI as my dungeon master. This one I have no clue what it is, but it sounds really cool. It sounds kind of like ChatGPT as a DM, but I don't know how that would actually work. So I assume it's going to be something way more complicated. His talks are always like interesting and very surprising, and the titles generally don't tell you everything that you're going to see. So I expect quite a bit there. And then we got the talk with Mark Whitten, which is going to be great. We'll get to talk about the new AI stuff that Unity is doing, find out what it is they can actually reveal and tell us about. I assume there's going to be some reasonably exciting news or info come out of this, but who knows? If you want to see it live, you got to make sure to come get your free ticket. And then after that, got Chris, who's going to be talking about harnessing the power of AI in game development, which is going to be like I think more on the coding side. So like a deep dive into all of the coding tools that you'd be using or that he's using and probably knows a lot of other people using to speed up production and development. But he's also got stable diffusion in there too. So I'm wondering how that ties in as well. So anyway, was there anything that you guys are kind of excited to learn more about, or are you guys all burned out on AI and just
I admit, like, I think people know I'm not super invested in a lot of the AI for game dev stuff, but I will say that last one, that talk from Chris. So Chris is in my mastermind group that I go to each week, and the thing that's really fun about the stuff that he's going to talk about is Chris cares about saving time as much as I care about software architecture. So for him, anything he can do to cut a corner in a good way and like in a practical, sustainable, like save himself time and get more stuff done is something that he cares about a lot. And so he's done some talks before and we've kind of chatted about this. He's a big fan of finding out where the breakpoints are in these kinds of software so we can use them practically to solve real problems every day. And so he's the person I know that does the most of this, where he's using these AI tools to do things like help write unit testing and automating his different processes and stuff. And so I find it fascinating because he uses it a lot more than I do. And I wouldn't use it for all of the ways he uses it, but I use it for some of them, and seeing him do that gives me inspiration for the stuff that I do use it for. So I'm always interested to see how he's approached, like how, not only how to use the tool, but how to use the tool to solve real problems in a way that's practical, you know?
Yeah, Chris is always heavily focused on that time saving. And I think part of that is from he spent a long time managing a relatively large software team, and any loss of time or any just minor change to productivity scales really, really fast with that. So he's seen it all the time. I think that was kind of one of the core things he got really good at, was helping people automate things and speed up the processes so that they're not going back and redoing things, reworking problems and all that stuff. I think that's probably going to be one of the most actionable ones for just everybody, because it's going to everybody watching this pretty much is writing code. So if you're writing code at all, it's going to be actionable for you there. The other ones, I assume, will be actionable depending on the scenarios. That, if you're doing anything with art, if you're doing anything with AI or NPC AI and stuff like that. But yeah, I expect Chris's will just be nothing but people installing tool after tool after tool and then jumping into the expo hall to ask them questions afterwards.
Yeah, I'm interested in that one, but I'm curious about the art and music generation too. I just finished listening to the Sid Meier's Memoirs audiobook. And do y'all remember CPU Bach?
No.
So he wrote basically a generative program to make music in the style of Bach. And this is way back. It was the problem was it was for some specific hardware that ended up not going anywhere. And you can't even play it today without an emulator. But that's something. So as a musician, that's something that interests me, and especially if it's a way you can generate music for your game based on a genre or something, that would definitely be awesome.
Yeah, I think that'll be cool. Like I said, I'm not good at like music at all. I certainly can't create music, so I feel like a good AI generator where I could give it kind of the theme and the idea of the thing that I'm searching for. If it could generate that, that'd be perfect. I mean, a lot of the time I just kind of search for like, scary horror thing or, calm sci-fi soundtrack or whatever, and I'll search and find the first couple of the best one out of like the first three and just pop that in. I feel like the generating stuff could definitely speed that process up. At least for the people, those of us that don't have an actual musician on the team.
Well, even though I'm a musician, I mean, who has time to compose and record music for your games when you can just go out and get assets? Or it's just, I'd rather be designing my game and writing code than making my own graphics or making my own music.
Yeah, this is where I really hope, like with AI music generation, obviously that's coming and it's going to sound good, I think, but it's still going to require somebody who knows what the heck they're listening for, like beyond just, oh, that sounds good to me, and hopefully you can gain it right. But there's that huge opportunity, I think, in the middle to have a musician create a system that utilizes AI in a way that, like many assets that we were talking about that you put on the store, that have the easy button, but also give you the ability to customize it. So you can get from an actual musician a sort of guardrailed system that gives you the flexibility to create your own stuff that doesn't necessarily sound like everybody else's and really works for your project, whatever your project is, but also has that musician's touch, which I think the AI is going to never really quite get correct. It's going to accidentally get it correct from time to time, but it's not going to be able to create an entire suite of tracks for an epic RPG that has 40 tracks spanning different biomes and genres and whatnot.
Yeah, because that's what I'm really curious about, to see what kind of state is it in now, how good is it, and how good can we expect it to get?
Yeah.
I'm very conflicted with the AI art stuff, specifically around audio. Again, as people know, 30 odd pairs of headphones behind me somewhere. I like my music. But it's not for the reasons people think, right? It's not about an elitist. I don't really care about the stylistic whatever. The problem that I have is it kind of gets into the weeds. I think the best example is something much simpler, which is animations in UI. So everybody at some point probably wants to put animation in their UI, and the classic example is tweening, and the classic way to do tweening is to use something like DoTween. But it's pretty straightforward insofar as out of the box, if you just use ease sign in out or whatever, or slide a button forward and back, it'll look better. That's it. As to why it looks better and the specifics of it are actually a much larger question. So without getting way too in the weeds, my point is that animation in UI is not about UI. It's actually about a different field called UX. It's user experience. The reason you put animations on your UI is not just to highlight the button. It's to do it in a way that's more, one, aesthetically pleasing, but the actual real reason is because it's an affordance thing that gives you more information about what should or shouldn't be happening and how things should work. So a good example of this is in the real world, when stuff moves, it doesn't start from zero velocity. It like builds up acceleration. And so as a result, we're attuned to seeing that kind of motion and it draws our eye. And so if you want to draw someone's eye to new incoming information, you have it mimic the way real things move in our sightline to get people to look at that thing. And so you're affording the UI to get them to engage with content. Now, all of this is to say that at a very base level, the point of tweening or animation in your UI is to mimic real-world affordance design that we're used to. So things should bounce or pop or slide or whatever in ways that are vaguely related to how reality works, because that's how our brain perceives it in the most pleasing and easy-to-follow ways. All of this is to say, people who do this professionally know this. People who don't put a button and put a bounce effect on it and go job done. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But the point is that this stuff exists as more than just press button, add bounce. There's like, you pick a bounce there for this reason because it applies this affordance, which tells you this information, and there's a reason to do it the right way. Now, all of that is I say that to bring up the fact that in some ways, AI-based art is better because it knows some of this stuff, not because it knows it intrinsically, but because when it's like taking the aggregate of a whole bunch of stuff from people who know what they're doing, it's going to look into a lot of these kinds of, oh, you should really have, on the 4 for your beat for your music, and make sure that whenever you do a beat, like all these like very specific things, it'll know, even if the person asking the questions don't know what they're really asking. But the downside is to do it really well, to go from like okay to pretty good to really good, requires you to make the decisions in the right places. You're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it because right here, if you're doing a transition, what you want to do is cut the tail end of the song, move it to the front to add a lead in, so the next time it loops perfectly. Like these very specific decisions for your game based on the narrative of the experience of like adding different vertical or horizontal integration layers so that your game builds a momentum of a crescendo and drops or whatever. AI won't do that because it doesn't know your game and the kinds of stuff you're asking. So anyway, my point with that purely is, in some ways it's better because it knows standards that you may not actually know about when it's doing it. But the downside is, if you did hire someone to do this, they wouldn't just know the standards. They would know the standards and also tweak and apply them specifically to the use case of your project and make a better project. So I find that the reason why people say it's a really good tool for professionals to use, it's not just a hand wave. It's because the professionals know when it matches the standards and when it doesn't, and they can tweak accordingly. So I think these tools are at their best when they're used by people who, quite frankly, could have done it themselves, but are using it to speed up things. Not when they're used by people who are using it to replace the very careers they think that they're getting away with replacing.
Yeah, that I think sounds about right, especially when it comes to the bigger companies. I still feel like for the I think you kind of called that out too a little bit, but for the small guys, like all the small developers and the indie ones that we're never going to have any, real attention to this stuff, it's just going to make those things better and easier though, because instead of everybody reusing the same, general music that was kind of close, they can keep generating things until they come up with something that kind of fits more into what they want relatively quickly and have it hopefully be good. I feel like at least for 2D art, that's what it's done for me. Like it's made it so I can make a game that has 2D art and not have to worry about it costing me tens of thousands of dollars when I don't know. I don't have an art director and stuff that has a very specific design on that stuff. So
and that is a struggle too, yeah, because we're not talking about small amounts of money. Like I have an upcoming project where for a personal project, I wanted to have a 3D character made. Mm-hmm. And looking into it, as per talking to the guys here, I mean, Andrew knows more than both the best of us, is you're talking thousands for what's effectively like, wouldn't it be cool if I had this one model for this one thing? It's like, well, cool. You have to pay someone for their time. And it's like, if I'm not even finished on the idea for their project yet, investing 8,000 to 10,000 to get something to work for it is a lot for effectively to try an idea out. So it is, yeah. I empathize with the problem, but I do think it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is, but it's also one where like there's really nothing we can do about it. Like, to be honest, like the tech is getting created, it's going to be created. None of us are going to have any impact on it. It's just a matter of whether or not we use it because everybody else is going to.
I think for me, it opens up just opportunities. And in order to it enables people to do more, better, faster. And like with my North Star navigation thing that I'm working on, AI art, I'm using AI art for the compasses. I'm using AI art for the icons, etc. I would have to do Photoshop for that. And that, in fact, my first thing was like, well, let me just load up Photoshop. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm an idiot. Let me load up Midjourney, not Photoshop. And then bring it all into Photoshop, fix them up, crop them, fix the circles so they're circles, modify them for the purpose. But I was now the project's going to come with 25 ready to use compasses that all look slightly different, all work well together, all have all these different icons. And that's great because now it allows me to create a system that looks better. That's going to help more people do more things. And, that would not be possible for me without AI unless I hired somebody and paid thousands, which, let's be clear, I wouldn't have done because the system's not going to make thousands most likely. It's a bad investment at that point. So
I admit I'm still not there with doing that yet. What I do personally is I will use the AI generation tools for inspiration to see different shapes, layouts, and designs, and then I will take that into Photoshop or Illustrator more likely because I'm doing vector-based stuff, and then I will draw over it and take the rough layouts and then modify it as I like. But I fully respect the fact that like the difference that cuts out half the work I'd have to do, but that still means multiple hours to make a few different shapes effectively for something, you know.
Yeah, I definitely have spent about 8 hours over the course of last week or the week before rather, just in Photoshop, cropping, extracting, fixing up, all of the stuff that you need to do to make these work.
You're fixing up your transparency and everything. Yeah,
exactly. You can get, you get your prompt, and so you put an icon on a black background, white background, whichever it might be. If it's white, you then invert it. You do all this stuff, and then you have to fix the levels, and it takes some work. It's not the it's just a lot easier than somebody else doing it by hand. And I feel bad, I suppose, for some of the artists, but I don't think that they're necessarily out of a job. I think they just can now work on more important things, and for probably better clients than somebody like me who's going to try to pay them as little as possible because I can't afford to pay them what they actually should be getting paid. So hopefully it's going to be a win-win situation after all the dust settles.
Yeah, I don't see how. yeah, maybe, but I feel like it's definitely gonna hit everything somewhat, but it's also just not going away. I'm curious, out of everybody here, do you guys know anyone who still has like avoided and not tried any AI stuff at all? Because I know a couple people and I talked to them, and it still feels like they're basically like the old person who was afraid of a cell phone and didn't get one until 2010 or whatever,
The people I know, so I've heard some people on my Discord mention that they haven't used any AI for coding yet. They tried ChatGPT and they had a bad experience. It just didn't seem to work. And I think they just need to try a little bit harder to understand. You need to talk to it a certain way. You kind of need to know how to communicate with it. And then there's other people who are, there's a philosophical disagreement with AI. And for that reason, they refuse to use it. I think maybe those people have used it enough to know that they freaking hate it because of what it's going to destroy the world and kill everyone's job and eventually destroy the environment and kill all of humans too. Those are the two that I've known in my life.
Yeah, the second one I can see the logic for. The first one is the group of people that I keep running into and talking to and worrying about. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm not into that. And it just reminds me of, or like back when people would tell me that the internet wasn't that big of a deal and it wasn't going to be a big thing. Why am I always using this stupid internet thing? It feels very similar to that with a lot of people. Like I think that they're underestimating the power here of what's actually going on. I don't think they're all seeing what's happening.
I don't know many people like that, but the main reason why, again, I say this to put it bluntly, that's because most of the people I know are in tech and they're not naive enough to not have actually looked into the problem. Whether or not they came to a conclusion of wanting to use it's a different story, but literally every person I work with has at least decided this is a eventuality. It's a decision I need to know about and have gone and decided whether or not they're going to engage with it.
These are all my non-programmer friends, by the way. Yeah. Just to be clear, these are all non-technical, I
don't have many of those, so I can't really engage.
Old friends from a long time ago and family members and things like that.
I need to drop off, guys. Lunch is over, but thanks for having me.
All right, getting away before the AI gets angry.
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, I have to earn my paycheck. So.
Understandable. All right, well, it was good having you. We'll see you tomorrow, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
My nephew is 13, and he's about to take a computer science class in school, which I think is great that they even have it, because computer science, I mean, when I was 13, we had a typing class that you took
keyboarding.
And it was still the Apple IIe's. Even this was like 1993, 94, whatever it was, and there's still the Apple IIs with the green, and that's how I learned how to type. I took that 9-week course or whatever that you had to take. Everyone had to. But he's taking computer science class, and they're going to learn Photoshop, Illustrator, JavaScript, and Python apparently. And I'm like, ooh, that's some good stuff. And so I told him, you got to tell me. I need to talk to him and find out. Are they going to let you use the AI to do this? Like, what's their plan going to be for the AI? Because AI as a learning tool is immense for coding, but you have to use it. And I guess this probably transcends to all AI uses. And I think everybody who's used AI understands. There's a lot of people who think, oh, you just ask it a question, copy paste it, and then you don't learn anything. You're just copy pasting. It's like, no, you can't copy paste it. That's the stupidest thing you could do. That's actually, I think, using the AI and copy pasting the results is stupider than not using the AI at all. Like, I'd rather someone not use the AI than do that. But it's a great learning tool if you take the time to understand what it's saying, to ask it questions about what it's saying, to then implement it in your project, understand how it works, and then go back and build on that knowledge so you understand the core concepts. Because really, and I think you'd probably agree, the learning computer science is less about the actual language and more about the concepts, about the patterns, about the logic. And so, kind of, that's my theory.
Problem solving.
Yeah. And so I'm really curious to see how this, I think, 8th grade class is going to handle AI for the first time ever, because I'm sure last year they weren't dealing with it.
I agree with you, but I think the problem that I see is I think we're over the hump of the honeymoon period of AI as a brand new shiny toy. We're at the point now, it's still good, it still does amazing stuff, and it's still going to get better. There's still considerably more research and money going into it as a field. But what a lot of people who were following this but not following it technically didn't understand was the problems we're hitting now, where the number one factor to good AI is information. That's it. Second is good processing power, but you can get the same outcome a lot slower with just the good information. And a lot of people just, I don't think, appreciated how we ate the internet. Like, that was the entirety of the internet to get where we are. And so we've hit this particular kind of crescendo point where we have to now start manufacturing better data, because right now it's really cool and it's way better than anyone thought talking to a computer would ever be in the next 20 years or whatever, but it's still not actually good or useful in a lot of cases. It is really fun and interesting and technical, but AI art in a lot of cases looks like AI art. You can tell from the particular patterns and practices of, if you average everything out that much, it ends up looking a certain way. And in the same vein with a lot of the design stuff, a lot of its conversations boil down to like distilled listicles and articles. If you ask it any question on any topic, it'll give you back a 10-point bullet point list of, well, here's how you do the most obvious generic, do the steps that every article will tell you, because that's what it's doing. It's giving you the averages. Again, I'm not saying that it's bad, but what I'm saying is, if you're a citizen of the internet and have been for a long time, searching and finding information is not really that hard. Google is actually an insanely powerful tool to do that. What I've found it useful for is getting the yes anding, being able to ask a question and then say, but why that way? And it gives you enough information to follow the lead down the rabbit hole to like then go back to Google better informed as to what questions to ask or how to like further distill stuff. But I guess my point with all of this is to say that right now AI isn't everything, in the same way the cloud wasn't everything, or NFTs were in everything, or whatever else the next hotness is. But its actual practical value in most things is actually very small. There is some use cases like autocomplete text stuff, or there's some use cases like Photoshop's amazing generative fill that are actual game changers for that specific industry. But a lot of this, like email shorteners and email lengtheners and email definers, it's fun and it feels like it's productive, but it's not. It's garbage, because anybody who writes that stuff, no one's reading it. Anybody who takes the next thing is going to shrink it down anyway. It's this weird meta game we're playing where we're manufacturing use for AI by the sheer nature of everything has it in it. The actual use cases where it practically makes stuff better are in cases like with you, Andrew, building the images for your icon packs of like different. That's like a practical, this actually is a thing. I need multiple variations. That's even hard for a real person to make 500 unique faces, not just physically, but like design wise to make them unique. These things are useful, but I guess we need to get to a point where we find out what the hell the point of all of this stuff is. We need to have very dedicated, targeted use cases that actively are valuable, that don't just feel like AI was added for the sake of AI being added, you know?
Yeah, I certainly would get there. I would imagine, and Wyman, maybe you have more memory of the internet talking about people back in 94, 95.
Well, and I'm just thinking through the cloud stuff now, and like it's literally where everything has almost nobody self-hosts. Everything is in some cloud service or some SaaS now. I mean, I feel like AI is going to be the same way, where it's just going to be in everything and taking over big portions of most things. I think there's definitely going to be lots of stupid uses for it, but there's always stupid uses for everything. But I feel like it's not. I think that it's easy for us to get kind of locked into just a game dev mindset too, of like what things are useful for us, like in our own game or our own day jobs, and then not thinking about all of the other scenarios and other things that you can use it for, and then of course everybody else's jobs. A lot of people's jobs I feel like can just get and are getting automated away. I mean, I saw that one of you guys even mentioned the drive-throughs recently that have switched over to AI order taking because it does a better job at I forget which one it was. One of them switched them all over.
Yeah, I mean they were already doing that. So it's an interesting thing because so a lot of drive-throughs had years ago, I think maybe like 10 years ago, started using call centers essentially. So you're not talking to the person in the restaurant, you're talking to someone in a call center who's just listening to who knows how many drive-throughs, perhaps even different restaurants. The next step, of course, is understanding. It's really not necessarily AI, I would bet, but just understanding what people are saying and being able to have a very smart decision tree, I suppose.
Right, but they're using the new AI systems to do that. The AI audio detection.
Okay.
Right? Those systems are what are telling it what the words are.
But this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is like, again, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm questioning whether we should do it. That's a very different thing. Because what I mean is the reason why things suck is not often because people want things to suck. It's because they simply don't understand how to make things better. That's just a fact of life. Everyone wants things to be the best they can be, but they're limited by their understanding. And if your understanding is capped by what the button that makes the magic thing happen can do for you, you never understand the underlying architecture that got it to make that decision. Like, you can press a button and get nice colors because it uses some average rules to get nice colors, but you have no concept of why they're nice colors, what part of your brain is active, how it has gotten to the point where you're doing that, because that set of entrenched rules is known by people who do this professionally. And then a computer looked at all of them and said, oh, I guess this uses blue here a lot. It doesn't know why it uses blue there. It doesn't know what blue signifies or means narratively in terms of architecture and how to use the design, but it just does it because that's what it looks like it does. And that's perfectly fine in cases of like prototyping, testing, and making the average stuff look good. But the fact of the matter is, if the answer becomes everyone uses AI, the amount of people who are actually making decisions based on declarative understanding are going to get smaller and smaller. And you could argue that's fine. It might be. It's the whole thing about people don't remember stuff as much because they use Google more. Is that even a good thing or bad thing? It doesn't really matter. But my problem is, to make something truly interesting, transformative, or different than what's there, you need to tweak variables. And to tweak variables, you need to know what variables need tweaking. And if you don't know what variables are available to tweak, you're just going to keep generating stuff until something looks slightly better, but you're capped because you can never actively know which dials are within the bounds of safe values to change and still be good quality. You know what I mean? So I think fundamental understanding is always core, but AI is trending us in a direction of not wanting or caring to learn that. And as someone who spends my entire life focused on exclusively that thing, I get more and more frustrated when I see more people make things and they don't understand basic color theory or basic principles of UI design and stuff. And it's not like it's really complicated. I'm saying this stuff exists. It's out there. You can learn it in like a week. It's like not to be a professional, but just good enough to like understand what you're playing with. And I hope more people go that route rather than just saying, I can press a button and make AI do thing. It's like, yeah, but why? Understand the why you're getting the AI to do that. What are variables available to you? And I'm not seeing enough of that. I'm seeing too many people just press the button and take the output and do something with it. You know?
I think that's probably largely just the bubble that you're in, though, because you're surrounded by game developers who are using it to make stuff that they normally would have to work with other people to do. And I feel like there's a lot of Yeah, I feel like the other 99% of the scenarios are non-creative type things, or things where that creative thing doesn't matter nearly as much. Everything from people with a stupid little startup trying to come up with a logo idea for their company that isn't going to matter ever, to people just putting in actual data at their day jobs and having it transform the data into something that they can use, or find the useful data points in big sets of data, stuff like that. I feel like those things are going to be much more impactful. The creation side and stuff, I think, is important and big, but I feel like it's not really big. It only feels big because it's kind of where we are. I think that the rest of the stuff that AI is going to be doing, everything from teaching people and being able to have an unlimited nonstop conversation with the instructor, to keep going into why things are the way they are, how things work, without you ever feeling stupid, it can be huge, especially when it gets to the point where they can just kind of conversationally talk to the AI and have the AI, respond like a person and talking and explaining things without ever, getting irritated that they asked a stupid question that they already asked and answered 5 minutes ago. I feel like those types of things are going to be much more disruptive, and I feel like a lot of people are missing out on the opportunity of using AI for just random day-to-day things that they think are very difficult, but they could just ask a chat bot to give them the answer on how to do it.
I don't know how much I agree with that, for the main reason being that, like, I don't, like, I think that world makes sense. And teaching, for example, is probably, in my opinion, the best use case. That assistant on demand thing of someone who can answer your questions no matter how stupid you're being is probably the number one most beneficial thing that we're going to get out of all of this, in my opinion.
Can we pause? What about the drive-through one? So say the drive-through order taking. Do you not see that, assuming that it works 98% of the time, do you not see that as extremely valuable?
Well, I apologize. This is how my brain works, and so it's frustrating because I agree with you. So at the top level, the short answer to your question is yes. In most cases, it's better than people doing it. But if you go past the surface of that, the question is why? Well, the reason why is because most people doing it hate their jobs and are doing it just annoyed talking to people. That's not a question of is AI good. It's that AI is communicating better than a person would in a scenario where they're not really enjoying doing that task, talking to strangers in a way that's not particularly compelling. So the question is, how do we solve this? We don't make more automated people. We ask ourselves, when people are at a drive-through, do they want to have a conversation in the first place? Is that the thing they want to do to acquire their food? If the answer is yes, then maybe we go down the road of making better communicative AI for that purpose. But if the real question is, people want to find a way to do this process without having to engage with another human in that way, then automating a fake human to fill the slot.
I don't think that is the case, though. I don't think that people want a different solution. I think that you're right, though, that for the employees, that's probably the least fun job, especially after a while, because you're dealing with irritated people and people that are loud and other people talking over each other. And then people have an accent or speak a language that you don't even speak. And I feel like the AI could handle most of those and take away the part of the job that people don't like, while allowing them to continue on the other part and hopefully improve that experience. I still think it would probably need to be a monitored AI for a very long time in the future, like where a person can just take over if there's a problem. It can be listening to multiple, and if somebody's having a problem, they could just take it over. But I feel like if depending on how good the actual audio detection is and how well it can actually detect your orders and the changes to your orders, when your wife said something and then she changed her mind 3 times, depending on that, I feel like it could add I feel like it could be a big improvement, and just one of many things.
But again, that example to me is like, technically, yes, in every technical capacity, both as a person doing the job and the person receiving the outcome of that job, that feels like a technical improvement. That, I agree with you. I have no issues with that whatsoever. But what I'm saying is, philosophically, if you step out of that frame and look at the situations we're doing, we live in a world of manufactured problems, and we have manufactured solutions. But what we're doing is we're using AI to solve the problems that we manufactured. And then we're using AI to make more problems to solve than AI can solve. My point of this is, why do emails exist in a business setting? The answer is, the point of emails in a business setting is to impart information to solve problems. It is to give
quickly, so that you
Yeah.
don't have to send a letter up a chute and then wait a day for a
Yeah,
response.
the premise of it was instant communication of information so as to solve problems. That was the point of it. And so, if you say we have this magical AI thing that can automate processes, and we have this process or this goal, this objective of solving problems quickly, the answer would be, how do we use AI to solve problems quickly? But that's not what happens. What happens is we use AI to write more emails, to send more emails, to use AI to consume the emails, to shrink the emails, to get the information across. Because we're using the current world's dynamics and applying AI at both ends and just seeing what happens. When if we step back and go, actually, nobody wanted email. Email isn't the goal. Nobody wanted email in the first place. Email was a problem-solving tool, and we're now using AI to plumb the gaps on both sides and have a much more complicated chain when the end solution should be, let's step back and actually, now that we have this tool, find a way to solve the problem directly, using this in a different way. And this is like, and I mean this on a micro scale, is exponential across every field and industry. Every industry is going to be, oh, well, we can make phone calls better by using AI tools to have the back and forth for your automated tellers. It's like, cool. Nobody wants automated tellers in the first place. The point of that solution was to solve the real problem, which is I have a technical problem, my product doesn't work or isn't right, and I want to resolve this as quickly as possible. So applying AI to make the already bad system slightly less bad is not solving the problem. It is band-aiding it with more complexity when we could step back and go, we're in a really technically advanced world now. Let's solve that problem directly. Let's stop doing this AI-based stitching of problems into different things. And that's what I mean. Like,
how do you see what's the full solution there on that? You got your broken product and you need to get support.
well, again, I don't know the answer. I'm not saying I'm not saying I know the answer to the question. But what I'm saying is, if we have all of these resources and all of these supercomputers building all of these stuff, the answer isn't. I can tell you for certain, it is not building a slightly less annoying and more patient version of an AI chatbot. That is an intermediary stop. And it's fine that we can have the intermediary stopgap, but the truth of the matter is, in a world where we solve these problems, the goal shouldn't be, because what's going to happen is we're going to replace people with AI. AI will be all of the mediums of communication, all of the texts, all of the emails, all of the phone calls, and that's fine. But then people are going to get used to that, and it's going to end up being this tedium of, ugh, I hate these bloody robocalls. They'll work perfectly fine. We'll become numb to this idea, and now we'll just have another layer of entrenched nonsense where every day you have your voice chat tell you about the weather and do this, and you'll be like, do I like any of this, or am I just doing it because this is what the systems have evolved to, this automated level of just, I now have to engage with 15 different AIs every day to do the different stuff because that's what the systems have evolved to, when that's not really what my intentions were in the first place.
For now. I think that's the big thing. It's all for now. I think of even the telephones, right? If you think about the very first telephones as I understand them, you pick up the thing, you talk to a person who connects you to another person, and you say, connect me to something and weird numbers and names.
Up, plug in the wire.
And then it got better. And then eventually there was a rotary dial. And then they were like, well, that takes too long. Let's do the push tone dial. And then they're like, okay, well, now you get cell phones. Now you don't even have to dial. You just type a person's name. Now you can just say, call Jason. Which Jason? Call Weimann, I mean, And now people don't call anymore. They text. Because turns out it wasn't always about calling. It was about communicating. And so now we're texting. Now we're using other means of communicating. Now, Instagram for a while was communicating through pictures. Now emojis communicate through emojis. So I think what we do is we always build, most of us. There's going to be few who take that second step. And I think, Story, you're taking that second step. That's what you do. You go beyond. Most people, especially the people with businesses where they have shareholders and they have to, just optimize things, take baby steps. They go the one step. They take okay, well, we need to save money and have a better user experience in the drive-thrus. And let's be clear, paying somebody $15 an hour to work in a drive-thru will save them a lot of money if they don't have to pay $15 an hour, if they can pay $5 an hour for an AI to do it instead. So you take these baby steps and eventually that transcends to something much bigger. And when we look back, I think you can see the thread. You can see the chain of events to go from, rotary telephones to emojis. And you wouldn't necessarily have had emojis come out of the internet, but they did. So it's only in hindsight. So I think for now, we're going to get really weird use cases. We're going to get stupid use cases. Alexa is going to use AI, and it's going to be funny. It's going to be stupid.
It's going to be better, though, because the current Alexa voice stuff is terrible. So once they actually get that, I don't know where, actually, I shouldn't say it. Last time I tried it, the voice stuff on the Alexa was terrible. They may have already updated it.
It's still
horrible.
Oh.
It's laughably horrible, but eventually it's going to get better. And these things I think are going to get better and better, and to the point where, you know, I mean, we use computers in everything, single thing we do. Everything we do has a computer in it, but we abstract away all that stuff to where, yes, you're using AI, but you're not going to be using AI.
I think I'm trying to be really careful with phrasing this, because the thing is that I agree with you, and it can be very easy for someone to say that what I'm saying is something called nirvana fallacy, where it's like, if you can't have it perfect, why bother at all? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, those shortcuts we take and slight improvements we take eventually become the new baseline standard, and what I mean by that, like, there's a classic story about a kid who goes to her mother and notices that her mother, whenever she puts a pot roast in the oven, would cut the ends off. And it's like, why do you do that? It's like, oh, I don't know, just something my mother always used to do, and so I just do that too. And so she asks her mother, then asks her grandmother, and goes all the way down the chain. And the answer was, oh, well, our pot was too small, so I would just like cut the ends before I put it in the pot. And then people would just do that then, because that's because what's settled is like the new thing. And my worry isn't the individuals; it's that I don't think most people realize how much of the life we lead are predicated on decisions that were made for reasons that don't actually make sense anymore. Take the standard keyboard. The whole point of typesetting originally was people used to dip a thing in ink, stab it onto the page, you would get thing. Then you wanted to make that more portable, so you had a briefcase where you had letters in it. And in this briefcase, you had on the lower portion the lower shapes, and on the upper portion, you had the upper shapes. You had uppercase and lowercase letters that you would carry around to do your job. And then, when people started to automate this, it's like, well, that's too much work. What if we had this typewriter, so we could write it out, and it would use a hammer to hit the things and do the ink and paint, whatever, and so on and so on. And so people will be doing this, and then we end up with, okay, we need keyboards. And so people are already accustomed to having their hands on this keyboard setup. And the letters were chosen relatively arbitrarily as an order of, like, just stack the letters together. There was some question about possibly weighted letters that were more used or whatever. But we now know...
But I assume it's also so that the things aren't going up side by side.
Yeah, that was the other part too.
Two letters that are right next to each other.
There was a weighted... You're 100% right. There was a weighted difference between which letters went beside each other to avoid risks of the hammers combining. So all of this is to say that's why that decision was made. But then people got used to it and moved to keyboards. And now we have things like RSI, because the way we use keyboards is not really a good way to use type. Like, you can't leave your hand in that shape for too long. So then people are like, well, that's a problem. So let's build pads that raise our arms up a little bit. And let's build more. So products are being built on top of products to solve problems that don't need to exist, that exist because of the standards that were set up because they used to solve a different problem that was solved before. And so I'm not saying that we can't do this incremental step. I'm saying AI is so powerful and can do so much stuff that if we actually just stop for a second and just start shoehorning into everything we're doing and go, well, actually, let's take a step back and go, what were the original problems? How could we apply this tool to those problems? Maybe we don't need to reinvent email via AI. Like, can we just stop for a second, please? That's what I mean.
How often do you write anything with your hand these days? Like,
often.
We're talking to programmers. Oh, with my hands. Oh, you mean actually
with your hands? Like with
paper? Yeah.
Because I do from time to time, but my handwriting is messier than ever before, and my hand hurts after a short while. I don't know how I survived school because
I learned a trick for that. I'll have to send you the link.
But I wonder how long it's going to be before we stop typing because there's no need to anymore.
Yeah, but now you get into WALL-E scenario where everyone is a blob floating in a chair being fed liquid in a tube.
I don't think we're going to be blobs.
Or it's like Star Trek, where you're just touching a couple things on there and then talking to it.
I think so. This is again a little bit of a political philosophy thing, but when it comes to the WALL-E blob, I think there's an assumption that all of us make to some degree, some way more than others, that unless people have structure or a job or something, they're going to be sitting on their ass all day playing Xbox and eating Cheetos and turn into WALL-E blob. Maybe that's true to some extent, but I think humans don't really desire that for their entire life. Most of us. Some people probably would be very content. Fine, more power to them. They can buy the games I make. But most people, I think, if you give them a situation where they have full freedom to do anything they want, they're not going to be a blob. They're going to find things that fulfill them for their background, their world, their society, their desires in life. So if you suddenly were to say, hey, AI is making all of our jobs easier, we're all going to work 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week, you're going to find a lot of people coming up with a lot of great new ideas, a lot of new creative endeavors, a lot of social helpfulness things, charity work, et cetera, a lot of education work, because they suddenly have free time on their hand and they're not tied down by these structures that we've built into. I mean, why do we have a 40-hour work week? You can go back and see how many people died in order to get us a 40-hour work week. And now people are saying we need a 4-day work week, and nobody's going to die for a 4-day work week these days, but they might lose their job over it. A few people are going to lose their jobs. They're going to, but eventually I think we're not going to be blobs, is what I'm saying. Is all this AI stuff should, if done appropriately, and it's going to take a while because right now the people, capitalism, are going to make a lot of money off the AIs and taking our jobs and all that. But eventually, I do hope we get to a point where nobody has to work in the drive-through window, because that's a stupid job. And unless you're the guy from American Beauty, then you don't want to work in the drive-through window. And I don't care. I know some people will say, well, young kids need a job that kind of sucks to build up their character. And I say they don't. So
well, despite how it sounds, I actually agree with everything you said. I agree with all of that. Like, that's not at all a problem for me.
Yeah.
I don't. That's not an issue. The issue for me, though, is more systemically looking at how things, again, they stack and change. For example, like 3 of the biggest MMOs in the world have recently had some form of update that downgraded their behavior. They have either moved back to a previous version, or they've done some variation of a rollback to like a nostalgic, simpler version. And simpler often means harder. Like, legitimately, a lot of the quality of life additions are removed. And the question is why? And the naive answer is, oh, it's nostalgic. People prefer that. Well, no, new users are enjoying the old ones sometimes more as well. And the question is, why is that? What is this weird thing that's happening? And the truth is, in that particular case, it's the fact that, and I felt this firsthand as a kid, is adversity breeds engagement, and engagement gives you emotional strength into a context of something, and you enjoy it more when you have to work for it. It's the cliche every parent told a kid, which is when you earn it yourself, you enjoy it more, you respect it more because you put more work into it. And the problem is, and I did this again, the example for me was the Game Boy. When I had one game, I would have to play it. I would be forced to engage with every confusing and frustrating part, and by the end of it, I'd have a very strong attachment to this game that I had to fight my way through. At some point, I learned how to get ROMs online, put them onto one of those R4 cards, and I suddenly hit 2,000 games. And now I have the patience of a goldfish, and I would open a game, play for 5 minutes, and as soon as anything remotely bothered me, I would switch back to the menu and pick another game because I could. And this isn't like kids these days in the attention span. I'm saying I myself didn't enjoy. I came away from that experience going, I didn't really find most of those particularly fun. I didn't enjoy myself in a way that I would have done had I forced myself past that point of this frustrating early stage. And so, while I don't disagree with you that we can give people their time back, that's good. That's a good thing. We should do that. But giving people the time back is fine. But what you end up with is falling into this trap of, if you give people time back. So let's look at the MMO example again. MMOs are now easier to play, easier to drop into, and easier to join. So people are doing that, and they're playing more. But they're playing more, but they're not enjoying them as much as they used to. They can't really articulate why, but it's just feeling a bit more rote and a bit more doing the job. Why? Because we're automating it and literally doing the job for them. We're cutting out a lot of the frustrating, long portions. And so people end up not engaging with as much. So how do we solve the new problem, which is people aren't engaging with MMOs? We need to make them more bombastic. We need to make them shinier, add more things, add more of the fancy lights and fancy shiny effects to keep people's attention. But we're not solving the original problem. We're just solving the new problem, which is people aren't engaged. Let's make it more engaging. So now you've got this entire industry built up around min-maxing people's attention spans and like using all of these automation tricks to get people's attention. It's like, we didn't actually need those back then. We use them now because we've brought games to a point where they're not as interesting, and then we're using hacks to make them interesting again. When if you step back and look at the problem, the answer is we're removing the friction that used to make the thing compelling to do in the first place. And so my argument isn't that AI is, like, again, one thing one way or another. I just mean there is a point with which the friction is a feature, not a bug. And AI is moving people away from the idea of actually engaging with that problem of like, actually, should this be harder for me? Should I engage with this in a way that's more compelling or more engaging, or that will make the end product better or make me better with it, you know?
I think one consideration that's important to think about, I don't know how much this plays into the MMO example. I'm sure it does play to some degree, is the profit motive. At some point, a harder game might be more fun, but it will make less money. So let's make the game that makes more money. And I think there's going to be some layers of that people forgot, about 15 years ago, because everybody working the company today doesn't remember 15 years ago, but they're still doing the let's maximize every single update to maximize revenue at the expense. If they could say this game sucks, but we're making a lot of money, then they're going to do that, right? So I wonder, though, in the same way that if we remove the need to have money, now we're getting really political here. If you remove the profit motive from these companies, what decisions would they make differently? Would they make a better game? Would they make a game that is less people like it because it's harder? And so some people are like, that's not what I want. So those people go off somewhere else, but it's a better game for those who do like it.
I don't think so. I don't think that would fix the problem. The profit part is I'm sure a small part of it, but a lot of it I think comes from the teams just getting big and having so many people on there with conflicting decisions, and things tend to get watered down. Things are too hard for one producer one day in a meeting, and suddenly there's a relatively drastic game-wide change for something that impacts all these other systems, and then those kind of stack up over time. Is every couple months there's some problem that's suddenly a big issue and needs to adjust the balance, and then things get easier and easier and easier, and then somebody else made this system to make it easier for players, so now we have to copy that too, because that must be why their game is doing better than ours. And you get I think a lot of that. Unless you have somebody that's very strongly pushing for a very specific vision and not able to be overridden. But like most of the time, the companies are big and they're companies. They're not, one person shops where one person is really making those decisions.
Nobody wants to make crap. I think people forget that. Like, some people are more willing to accept crap as their end product, but nobody's like, yeah, let's make a really bad game. Nobody thinks that. Literally, nobody actively wants a bad game. They might be willing to accept this is good enough or will make enough money that will be a contributing factor. But that's rarely the actual reason why something turns out bad. It's normally down to the fact that people do not understand project management or scope or all the other issues that go into making something work. And so again, to go back to the thing, we can make buttons that let us generate art faster, which is one way to solve the games aren't being made as good as they could problem. Or we can go back to, hang on, the real problem is people aren't planning and managing their time properly or managing expectations. If we put AI there rather than on the making the art stuff faster, you would have people taking their time with the decision making, and you'll end up with better games. But it's not just better games because we have shiny graphics because we press the magic button at the end. So again, I'm not saying we don't use AI in the problem solving, but find the root of the problem and solve that, which is games aren't being made at the rate they could be because people are failing at much simpler things, which is managing their time, managing their expectations, understanding what users want, and making things fun.
Yeah. I guess it's very similar to Unity and Unreal and other game engines in a way. That's, because you can now do more, and it doesn't mean you can make a good game. It just means you can make a game. You can get something from the asset store, get some AI art, change the art out, make your own Oregon Trail. Great. You're a game developer now.
Just got to make it fun, make it interesting.
Yeah. But hopefully, in the end, I will be able to say, hey, not Alexa, hey, AI, just put on some music that I like to listen to when I'm working, and it just knows what I like to listen to, and it creates some new music or uses some human music. I don't care which, just make me music and let me move on with my life, because I don't want to think about curating my own music playlist. For me,
tell the holodeck to just make a whole band for you.
My friends love curating their playlists. That's what they do. They spend hours curating their playlist for a party. I tell them, hey, I'm having a party. Can you press play on your device? Because I don't want to do that.
That's funny. I just hit YouTube Music and I press play.
Exactly.
But of course, I also do that with the little ones. So I'll be driving down the street half the time and it'll switch over to a Frozen song or Old MacDonald randomly.
Yeah.
And,
The for
it's always fun.
you mix is always going to be mixed in between game music, hardcore rap, and kids music.
Yeah,
I will say
pretty
all of that, as contradictory as it may seem, I've listened to a lot of AI generated music recently, but only the ones where it's like you take singer X singing song Y. I can't help it. I find those things so much fun. Frank Sinatra can make anything sound good. He just whatever he sings is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard some really bad music lately too. So it was professionally produced.
I will say though, I stumbled upon a guy, Mark something, who sounds just like Freddie Mercury. He's not AI. He's a real guy. He's on YouTube. I stumbled upon him when looking at Freddie Mercury AI stuff, and he's better than the AI. And then I found an AI, Freddie Mercury AI, that actually used his track. Now we're getting too far.
That's hilarious. Oh man. So before we do go, I wanted to remind everybody to go subscribe to Magic Pig Games. We're at 2,990 something. 2.99K.
We need 6 more to get to 3,000 subscribers. And really we need like 10 more because 4 will unsubscribe at some point in the next week. So,
Oh. Okay. Oh, I'm refreshing it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get up there.
Yeah.
I'm almost to 200,000 too, by the way. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And also don't forget to check out the conference tomorrow. It's free online. You can just hop in, come join and watch, ask questions in the Q&A, or you can grab the Pro Pass. It's really cheap too. And just come join us in the expo hall. We'll be hanging out. I got to jump over there and start working on that in just a few minutes. Finish getting that all set up. Also, if you wanted a booth in the expo hall, email me. I've got a couple of them setting up. I've got pals getting set up and a couple other people. All I need is a logo and I'll get you the info so you can get in there. And don't forget to grab that Humble Bundle. How much time is left on that bundle that's like 99% off?
Like a week.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's necessarily just like the price, and it's like just remove 2 digits.
Yeah. I mean, what you don't see necessarily without digging into it is that the Proto Factor packs have like 30 characters. The Infinity PBR monster packs have 4 each. And I think some of the other packs are like just large asset packages. They're not like one thing.
Yeah, that's quite a big pack.
Also, like, again, let's be real. There's a lot of services out there that sell stuff at prices that no one's ever expected to buy them. I'm looking at you, Udemy. Everyone knows that first price is not the real price. We're well past the point where... Anyway,
yes.
I will say that I don't know about all of the assets in there, but there's legitimately assets in that pack that have been on my wish list in my Unity thing at the stated price for about 5 years. So you could argue whether age deprecates stuff or whatever, but the truth of the matter is these are like... The cost of this to make is more than the cost of the stuff that they're like. We're talking it might have cost 15,000 to produce the thing that even then was selling for 200, which is now part of a thing at 35. So truly, like, I genuinely agree that this is actually worth the price of admission by a large margin. Like it's not just marketing fluff. It's legitimately a good deal.
Yeah, I've been vocal. I know Proto Factor, he's a jack of all trades. He makes his own stuff, which I'm super jealous of. I don't have those skills and I haven't learned those skills, so I pay people. And as we said earlier, I've been very open that characters, the basic monsters, cost me at least $3,000 to $4,000, and that was years ago when they were made to make. And the more complex ones, we're talking upwards of $10,000 or more in some cases. So the amount of money that goes into, if you had to get an artist to make all of just the Proto Factor characters, you're talking $300,000, if you, the whole thing. So,
I think that our cost for first environment was about 300,000 of creation of that asset.
Jeez.
Yeah, so
wow.
Because it was for person working for 18 months.
There you go.
So some of these assets are quite heavy to build.
Asset store is pretty cool in the end.
The Humble Bundle is even better. Go grab that deal. And doesn't a Humble Bundle also give you a 10% off discount?
There is a 10% off
on the asset store for all the stuff? Yeah. that deal is crazy. I would say definitely go grab it. All right, you guys got anything else before we wrap up this week?
No.
All right. Well, I guess with that, everybody, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, drop comments if you got questions or thoughts, and come join us tomorrow at AI Game Dev Day. It's, again, free. Just go to GameDevGuild.com. I'll drop the link in there one more time. And come join us and talk about all the AI stuff and figure out what stuff we're actually going to use and what we're going to not use, and what stuff is going to destroy the world. So, I don't know. Maybe, or which stuff is going to take out capitalism for Andrew. I think you're a little too optimistic. I think
just the crazy parts of capitalism.
Yeah, I think I think there's going to be a lot of crazier things popping up, but we'll have to have a full talk about that afterwards. All right, everybody. Thanks again. I'll see you all next tomorrow. Yeah, next.